it isn't obvious to me, and I think maybe I derived this criticism from Nietzsche, but people have asked me whether or not I believe in God, and I've answered in various ways. No, but I'm afraid he probably exists. That's one answer. Yeah, no, but I'm terrified he might exist. That would be a truthful answer to some degree, or that I act as if God exists, which I think is, I do my best to do that. But then there's a real stumbling block there, because there's no limit to what would happen if you acted like God existed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I believe that acting that out fully, I mean, maybe it's not reasonable to say to believers, you aren't sufficiently transformed for me to believe that you believe in God, or that you believe the story that you're telling me. You're not a sufficient, the way you live isn't sufficient testament to the truth. And people would certainly say that, let's say, about the Catholic Church, or at least the way that it's been portrayed, is that with all the sexual corruption, for example, it's like, really, you believe that the Son of God, that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and yet you act that way, and I'm supposed to buy your belief. And it seems to me that the church is actually quite guilty on that account, because the attempts to clean up the mess have been rather half-hearted in my estimation.
Yeah.
And so I don't think Christians don't manifest this, and I'm including myself, I suppose, in that description, perhaps don't manifest the transformation of attitude that would enables the outside observer to easily conclude that they believe.
Yeah. Now, the way to deal with that, or the way to understand that, is that they do in a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of manifestation of the transformation that God offers the world, and we kind of live in that hierarchy, and those above us hold us together, you would say. And so in the church, there's a testimony of the saints. There are stories. There are hundreds and hundreds of stories of people who live that out in their particular context to the limit of what it's possible to live it. And even today, there are saints, living saints, who, for example, like in the Orthodox tradition, we have this idea of what they call it, the gift of tears, or the joyful sorrow of people who live in prayer with weeping, constant weeping. And it's this kind of strange mix of joy and sadness, which kind of overwhelm them, and they live in that joy and sadness nonstop, and they pray, without end. And so that exists. But then that's one of the reasons why. That's kind of one of the reasons why, when I talk about this idea of attention, like it manifests itself in the church as well, is that you often say, and I understand it, when you say something like, I act as if God exists, or, I'm afraid to say that God exists. And I think it's because you think, or you tend to think, that the moral weight of that is so strong that we would crumble under it, that you would just be crushed under it. And I think
believe that.
And I think I understand that, but the first thing to act as if God exists, let's say it this way, to act as if God exists, the first thing that it asks of you is not a moral action. The first thing that it asks of you is attention. That's why to act as if God exists is, first of all, to worship. I know people are going to hear this.
Well, then I have a terrible problem with that too at the moment, because I'm in so much pain. Like, one of the things that one of these theologians discussed the idea of, and sorry, I want to let you get back to your point, but he discussed the idea of the yoke of Christ being light, and that there was joy in it. And there's a paradox there, obviously, because it's also a take up your cross and follow me sort of thing. But the fact that I've been living in constant pain makes the idea of joy seem cruel, I would say. And so, and I have no idea how to reconcile myself to that. I mean, I've reconciled myself to that by staying alive, despite it. You know, although by staying alive despite it, but there's very little worship. And it doesn't mean I'm not appreciative of what I have. I'm not only am I appreciative of what I have, I do everything I can to remind myself of it all the time. And so does my wife. I mean, she's changed quite a bit as a consequence of her struggle with cancer, you know, has become much more overtly religious, I would say. And, you know, we say grace before our meal in the evening, and it's a very serious enterprise. And it always centers around gratitude, you know, for the ridiculous volume of blessings that have been showered down upon us at a volume that's really quite incomprehensible. But despite that, despite that, I'm struggling with this because I don't know how to reconcile myself to the fact of constant pain.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's unjust, which is halfway to being resentful, which is not a good outcome.
No, I agree. And I can't speak, I don't know how to speak to that because I don't have that experience. You know, I don't have that. I don't live with constant pain. And so I don't know what that would do to me. It's probably one of the reasons why it might ruin me, you know? And so, it's very difficult to answer that. I think that the answer has been the cross. Like that's been the answer. It's maybe easy for me to just say it that way. But that's always been the answer of Christianity, which is that God went to the cross and that God went down into death and plunged down into death. And there are mysteries hidden. And they're very well hidden, but there are mysteries hidden in that depth. But it's not. I don't think it's my job to moralize to you at this particular moment.